Welcome to the Damien Jones podcast. Thank you so much for joining us again. Today is Wednesday, May 13th. I hope that everyone is safe. Everyone is social distancing. Everyone is wearing your mask and practicing whatever the public health behaviors that have been recommended by your public officials in your particular area. But glad that you're with us today. We have a really intriguing show for you today. If this is your first time joining us today, hit the like button. And throughout the conversation, if you hear something you like, hit the like button. If this is if you are a regular viewer of this show, we are so thankful for you as well. Hit the heart button right now, or within the conversation, today's conversation, hit the heart button. Let us know what you like. Comment with us throughout the conversation as well. But just be interactive with us. We really appreciate it. Helps us understand what we're doing well and where we can improve. If you missed our last show, it was really good. So I encourage you to go to IamDamienJones.com and check out that content as well. It's really good. You don't want to miss. But today's show is really intriguing and really special. We talk about often reaching across the aisle in the political arena and finding commonalities with those who we disagree with from an ideological standpoint. But what we often find, and what I often find, is that is only lip service. We talk about unifying this country, but often we are not having conversations with those whom we disagree with. Instead, we continue the divide. We demean one's ideas, and we feel as though we have nothing to talk about. And I would disagree with that. In order to bring this country forward, in order to lift every voice and lift every community, no matter the zip code, we have to have conversations with those we agree with, and also those who we don't see eye to eye with, in order to get an understanding. You can never get an understanding or find common ground with someone with whom you don't have dialogue with. And so today, we are going to hear from a good brother, a really good African-American brother, Diante Johnson, who is one of America's leading conservative voices, who is a supporter of President Trump, who is a conservative advocate, and also the president of the Black Conservative Federation. And I'm so thankful that he made time in his schedule to sit down with us. And but the reason why I reached out to Diante was I want to have a good conversation, but I feel this way across the board when it comes to, I'm a Democrat, but I don't despise those African Americans or anyone who decides to be a conservative or Republican. That's their right to align themselves with the party and who speaks best to their issues. We all have grown up differently. We all have been socialized differently. And so I think it is a great disservice to this country and to moving forward with great dialogue when we demonize folks, especially when we demonize Black Republicans. I think it's wrong. Do we see eye to eye on particular policy positions? We may not. But there are some things that we do see eye to eye on, and we can't find out what those commonalities are if we don't have conversations. Here's what I know. Whether you are a Black Republican, whether you are a Black Democrat, whether you are a Black independent, whether you are Black and you don't participate in any level of politics, overall, we are still catching hell. Black folks are still catching hell. We are still at the bottom when it comes to wealth in this country. We are still being brutalized by police. We still have a hard time reacclimating ourselves out of the criminal justice system. We are still being herded like cattle into the criminal justice system. And I could go on and on and on and on. Democrats have not resolved that problem. Republicans have not resolved those problems. Moderates and independents have not resolved those problems. So what I'm saying is that we are all one people: red, blue, black, white, green, blue. But as it relates to the chocolate side with black folks, we're all one people, and we should be working together with our brothers and sisters across the aisle to achieve what's best for people of color, for black people in this country. And when we do that, we will have a more well-rounded democracy. And so I ask that you open your minds today and listen to our good brother, Diante Johnson. He sat down with me and shared with me where he's from, why he's a conservative, and other things. I also want to add that Diante's organization, the Black Conservative Federation, also recently released a statement demanding justice in the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. I think this is really important as we get a full understanding of this Black conservative movement, and that we do have some commonalities. But also in our conversation, Diante also talked about why he supports the 45th president of the United States, Donald J. Trump. I hope this conversation is good for you. It was great for me. I got in as many questions as I could, but here's my conversation with Black Conservative Federation President, Mr. Diante Johnson. Damien Jones podcast, and I am joined now by Mr. Diante Johnson, who is the president of the Black Conservative Federation. You know, Diante does some great work in his role with the Black Conservative Federation. I thought it would be extremely, extremely important to have him on the podcast and just have a great, robust conversation about politics and all things in the news. Diante, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Damien. Thank you for having me on, and I'm looking forward to a great conversation.
Absolutely, absolutely. So first and foremost, I ask everybody this because I think this is so important. How are you and your family adjusting to new life in this COVID-19 era?
Well, someone like myself who works from home on a regular basis, this has been pretty normal. It's interesting now because there's more podcasts, there's more video,
Right.
there's more Zoom conferences, and so the world we're adapting. I think I was talking to my mother and sisters. We've now been doing FaceTime calls now because I'm in DC and they're in Illinois, but they may not be adapting much to it just because they're home all day and they're used to always been on the go and trying to find things to do. But someone like me, I'm used to on the phone doing work from home, and so it's been something that I've been able to adapt to very fine.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. Just kind of briefly tell us where you're from and kind of how you matriculated to where you are today.
So like I said, I'm from Chicago, Illinois. Being from Chicago gave me a great insight of what it means to be a conservative.
Okay.
I'm from the Roseland community, the south side of Chicago. And so people say, how does that make you a conservative? How does that being raised in the being brought up in the hood of Chicago and the South Side, how do you get conservative values out of that? I said, well, I get conservative values out of that because I've seen my family for far too long, my family and friends and just the community struggle for far too long and still continue to vote Democratic. And so I believe that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And so I said that they have voted Democratic for years. They have voted Democratic for years. However, there has not been any distinctive change. And so I said, well, let's do something differently. And I looked at the principles of the conservative movement, and I said, well, these are the values that I was raised upon.
And you were how old when you began to look at those principles?
I was, hmm, I know I was in eighth grade. I'll say that I
Okay.
was in.
Okay.
And so I've been in the movement for a while. I was in eighth grade, and I was, you know, I I supported President Obama, but I did not understand why I, as a black man, had to vote
Had to. Yeah.
for him. Like it was that notion that you just have to vote for him. But not even just that. I didn't understand why, as a black man, that I was required to vote Democratic.
It did. So
And
you felt kind of the
in a
communities,
box,
the
I felt like I
society.
was in a box.
You
Yes,
have to support this black guy,
yes.
although you
And
were
so
thinking differently.
exactly. And I actually thought that I had to vote Democratic. And I always heard people say, well, that's just what we vote. That's just what you do.
Hmm.
And I'm the rebel. And so I'm like, well, I don't want to vote Democratic. Like, I don't want to. Like, I don't like people telling me what to do. And so
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
Aries.
Same here. Same
And
here.
so, and as an Aries, we definitely don't like people telling us what to do. And so, um, I looked up because I was that rebel. I said, well, let me figure out what a Republican stands for. Let me figure out, like, and I didn't want anyone to tell me. I wanted to do the research on my own. And after I did the research, um, I then began to understand. I said, these are the teachings that I've been taught my whole life.
Hmm.
Like these are the values that I have been taught.
What are some of those teachings that kind of
So,
popped off the page at you?
so for the first thing is the freedom. The first thing is I always heard people saying that we have freedom of speech. Everyone's always fighting for the freedom of speech, being able to say whatever they want to say, being able to do what they want to say, and having the liberty of doing whatever they wanted to do.
Hmm.
The freedom of speech, and I've always heard people bashing the government and bashing political officials or whatever. And so I said, well, I've always been taught that I have the freedom. I have my freedom of speech. That's one amendment. The First Amendment is an amendment that we've all been taught. Then we talk about the Second Amendment, and growing up, I've always everyone's parent, everyone's father, everyone's parents had a gun in the house.
Hmm.
They just had one. Whether it was legal or illegal, they had one.
Right.
And so, and they've always talked about, I've always heard people talking about the gun range and being able to protect yourself. And I've always heard about that. Okay. And so we talk about the First Amendment and Second Amendment. But I even get into the abortion, and being growing up in a very Christian family, even the abortion case. We talk about abortion. I remember when abortion was something that was taboo in the family, in
Yeah.
the black.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you got one, no one knew about it. The father barely knew about it. And so it was something that was swept under the rug, and it wasn't something that people were proud of.
I mean, you could argue that that still hasn't changed much.
You know, you can argue, but now for some reason we now getting into the topic of the pro-life, pro-choice movement that
Hmm.
has now become something that people are arguing more now. I say that the abortion movement is somewhat like the what political party you vote for now. Is that that used to did not be something that we talked about.
Hmm.
We didn't usually talk about whether we voted Democrat or Republican. Now it's become something that, and some people still don't.
Yeah, it has become extremely politicized, as you mentioned. Either you are for it or you're against it, and your
Exactly.
position is it aligns you right with your particular uh, party. But keep on that path, telling us about your upbringing and school and
So,
all that good stuff.
so we talked. So like I said, we talked about the First and Second Amendment. We talked about the sanctity and dignity of life. We talk about economics, of smart money management.
Hmm.
I remember, and I tell my grandfather is a strong Democratic voter. He always votes Democratic. But I tell people all the time he's far more conservative than I am.
Yeah, yeah.
And I remember there was a situation, and I went to him, and I remember every situation asking him for money. And when asking him for money, it was something that I began to hate to do. because I always got a story, I always got a
Yeah.
bunch of questions, I always got something, and it was like it was to the point where I kind of felt bad, like not felt bad. I kind of it's kind of like he made me feel bad for asking him for money.
Mm-hmm.
And it was to the point where it was, I think the last time I asked him for money, and I told myself I will never ask him for money again as long as him and I should live. I'd rather go homeless before I ask him for money.
And why is that?
It's just I did not like the idea of having to, I mean, yes, if you give somebody money, you want to know what they're asking for money for,
Right.
yes, but I didn't like the idea of having to feel guilty about coming to ask for money.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
did not like that, and then I realized as an individual that was something that I hated to do, and that caused me to want to become independent.
Mm.
When I turned 16 on my 16th birthday, many people want to go out and party,
Yeah, you from Chicago, so y'all do it big. Y'all have big
yeah,
16 parties.
they want to go get their driver's license, they want to do all of that. Me, it was literally the night before my 16th birthday, maybe the day before my 16th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
I remember what I was doing was I was filling out a job application. I said, okay, I'm going to turn this in. I'll be 16 tomorrow. And I actually had an interview the next day after my 16th birthday at McDonald's. And literally within a week of becoming 16, I was working.
Mm-hmm.
That was something I was excited to
Trying
do.
to make ends meet.
Yeah, well, and it wasn't really the point of ends meet. It was the point of making my own money.
Yeah, yeah. Being
Like,
independent, not having to ask anybody for anything.
listen, there is no feeling.
Same here. I had my first job when I was 14. I was working at a seafood place, washing dishes every day. My older brother had a job there. They got me a job. I got hired at 14. I should not have. It was illegal at that time, but I wanted some money in my pocket. I think I was making like $6 an hour, and I would leave every day with tartar sauce and all kind of crap
And,
all over me. But I just wanted my own money.
exactly. And let me tell you something. One thing that I learned at 16 years old, when I got my first paycheck,
Mm-hmm.
that was the best feeling in the world.
Yep.
That was the best. Like, there is nothing like making your own money. Like, you worked hard for this money. There is nothing like making your own money. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it to where I was, anytime they called me to go in, I was going in. Anytime they said, hey, do you want to come in and work some extra hours? Do you want to stay later? Do you want to work all day? I've worked some 13-hour shifts just because I enjoyed it. Now, I hated the work, but I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed making the money. And so it was something that I enjoyed doing. And I just could not understand why anybody wouldn't want to make their own money.
Right.
And then what happened was I did not have to ask my parents for money. I loved it. I loved it because they gave me a sense of independence that
Independence. Yeah.
I just love to have, because no one could tell me how to spend my money, and no
So,
one could, I didn't have to worry about how, tell me how to spend the money, but also what to do with my money.
right. Right. So, how many siblings do you have?
So I am the youngest of four. My mother has four children.
Okay. And where'd you go to college?
University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana.
Okay. What'd you study?
Political science, constitutional law.
Okay. So you knew that you wanted to move into this political realm at some point. How did that bug get started?
Yeah, I ran for office at I ran for office at 19 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay. Congratulations. What'd you run
County,
for?
ran for a county board position, lost by a very small margin.
In Cook County?
No, I was
Oh, okay.
in Marion County while I was in college. Marion County, Danville, Illinois, near
Okay.
Champaign.
Okay.
Um, but I've always been active. We moved to a town called Danville, Illinois, and where I went to high school at Danville High School. And there I got very active locally, and and like I tell people, I have been at every aspect of a campaign. You know, there's only job that I have not held on a campaign is the finance director.
Okay. But you've been campaign manager,
And the candidate, I've been the political director, I've been
director. Yeah.
consultant. I've
Hey,
been the
oh,
field director,
yeah,
and so I've done it all.
same
Uh,
here.
and so even in coalitions. But one thing about it is that I started out very young before I was able to vote, and so that means all I could really do was stuff envelopes and put signs out,
Yeah,
and I enjoyed that. And then when I was able to start knocking doors and making phone calls, I was excited.
yeah,
I was excited. I enjoyed doing it. And there's people who hate doing that as they get older, as they grow in the movement. I will tell you this: running a national organization, something I still enjoy doing is knocking doors and making phone calls.
yeah. So let me ask you this. So talk to us about the work that you do at the Black Conservative Federation.
So the Black Conservative Federation, we're entering into our fourth year.
Hmm.
We are a hub for Black conservatives. We are a hub for Black conservatives to where we want to make sure that Black conservatives no longer feel alone. I remember growing up as a conservative in Illinois. I felt like I was the only conservative in the country. Felt like I was the only conservative. I felt like there was no one else that shared my sentiments around
Hmm.
the country, and that it was probably only about five of us: Condoleezza Rice, Colin Powell, uh, AC Watts.
That's
I felt
it.
like
That's
at that
it.
time I felt like
Tim
I was
Scott.
one of
Yeah.
them.
Right.
And that was even before Tim Scott was elected, and so I
Okay.
felt like I was one of them. Um, and because I didn't hear anything about it. No one talked about that there were Black conservatives. You didn't see them in the media as much, and then it was, and so I felt like I was alone. And I had attended some conferences once I got out of high school, attending conferences in DC, and I started to really network through social media and learned that there are uh,
Tons and tons.
I'm like, wow. And every day it's like I was getting excited every time I saw a Black conservative. Now when I see a Black conservative, like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Right.
here we go. I said, but I enjoyed it. I enjoy it, and I do enjoy it, but I wanted to make sure that no one felt alone. And so that's
So
why we wanted to.
you created the organization.
I am the founder
Okay.
of the
Okay.
organization.
Good.
And so I
Good.
wanted to make sure that we no longer were felt alone, and that there are people that I felt that like there was people like me around the country
Hmm.
having that same problem,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
having
So
that same problem. And I felt like those people around the country having that same problem, but also that um, they felt alone, and that they needed some representation. And that's so we wanted to make sure that we're a hub for Black conservatives. We stand for economic stability, educational advancement, and community involvement. Those are principles that everyone in the country should stand behind. Those are conservative principles. And those are principles that lead people to make sure that they are independent, make sure that they are able to be successful members of society.
so that leads me to my next question. What is the role of the Black conservative in the American small d democratic experiment?
Of Black conservatives, or of the Black Conservative Federation?
Well, I just the Black conservative as in general.
The role of Black conservatives, we're conservatives. I think our role is the same as the role of Black liberals or Black Democrats. We are African Americans who want to make sure that our community is growing and our community is flourishing like never before. And so, as a Black conservative, my goal is I want to be a solutionist. I want to create solutions for my community. I want my nieces and nephews and future children to have a better America than it was when I inherited. I want to make sure that tomorrow is better than it was yesterday. And so we all have that goal of fighting to make sure that there is a better lifestyle, and we want to make sure that our community is thriving. The difference is how we get there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. How so? Uh, how long have you been a conservative? Yeah, I mean, you said since
So
about
this is my 10th year.
10th year. Okay, 10th year. So here we are in 2020. Um, President Donald Trump has been our leader in this country for 4 years now, and he has been polarizing. He has been different. He has been straightforward. He has, some say he's been divisive. in some areas. Some folks say he has set the country back in so many different ways. And within all that he's done, whether you agree or disagree, he has given more passion and emboldened conservatives across the country, be you black, white, blue, green, or what have you. I'm going to come back to Donald Trump and want to have a deeper conversation about him in a moment. But given all those things, especially as an African American, and a lot of critiques that folks would levy on the Conservative Party and President Trump, is the disdain and the how they overlook, demean, and not value black, brown lives of color. Given all those things and those critiques and those narratives, what still attracts you to the Republican Party?
The policies doesn't change.
Mhm.
The policies that I stand for, the reasons that I explained why I'm a conservative: free enterprise, limited government, common sense regulation, the sanctity and dignity of life,
Mhm.
the support for the Second Amendment. Those policies does not change. Those policies are the policies of the party. And so as long as those policies of the party, the policies of this party, I will always be a conservative. And so, regardless of who's president, regardless of um, you know, regardless of who's president, regardless of where this party goes, as long as those policies are at the forefront of this party, I will always be a conservative. But as long as the Democrats continue to fight against those policies, I will not be a Democrat.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So black folks tend to be extremely loyal to the Democratic Party. Clearly, that bug did not bite you. Um, I would say personally that, I am a Democrat, but I am not extremely happy with the activity within the Democratic Party as it relates to progressing African Americans on the diversity question. Democrats nationally and locally can do so much more. Um, on the question of including their voices in different policies and different initiatives, Democrats can do so much better. But given that the African Americans have a very strong and powerful voting bloc, right here, I'm in the state of Texas, and we have the most African Americans of any state in the union. We saw that African Americans, particularly, saved Joe Biden's campaign from
South Carolina.
extinction, right? Especially in southern states.
Mhm.
Talk to me about the power in the African American voting bloc. No matter what your partisan affiliation, but talk to me about the power of it and the importance of having no permanent friends, but only permanent interests.
Well, if I can be candid and blunt, the
Please.
power ends at the primaries, the Democrat primaries.
Okay.
Other than that, blacks have no power, and they're not a voting bloc.
Unpack that a little bit for me.
90% of black votes go to the Democrat Party.
Hmm.
Okay, 90% of the black vote goes to the Democrat Party. If 90% of the black vote goes to the Democrat Party, that shows that blacks will vote for Democrats regardless of what happens or what they say. I look at it this way: as a political strategist, um, I will say this: is Democrats say that we can do whatever, it doesn't matter what we do, the black community will always vote for us.
Yeah, yeah.
Republican says it doesn't matter what we do, the black community will not vote for us. And so that's how it's been. And it's sad. And I was talking to a Democratic friend the other day, and we were talking about how it's been bad for the black community because every other race in this country is a voting bloc.
Hmm.
We talk about the Jewish community, how both sides fight very hard for the support of the Jewish community. We talk about the Asian community, how both sides fight very hard for the Asian community. But when it comes to the not the Latin, the black community, we it's already predictable.
Hmm.
And that's why our communities have suffered. That's why even if we pack it down all the way down into the local level, you look in the black community, There's dilapidated structures.
Absolutely.
There's, the roads are not, taken care of. There's stop signs hanging upside down, turned around. You can't see different signs.
So yeah, Damien Jones podcast having a great conversation with the president of the Black Conservative Federation, Diante Johnson. Diante, you just made a good point. You talked about in black neighborhoods, black communities, there's still rampant blight, dilapidated housing, schools are still decrepit. The wealth gap and inequality continues to widen. Um, it's tough to find jobs, and all of this is connected to loyalty and affiliation to the Democratic Party.
Yes.
Although you hear critiques from the Democratic Party saying black folks, they don't care about you, black folks, they don't have your best interests at heart, but we're still living in deep poverty.
Mhm.
Um, what is it about the Democratic Party that still attracts black folks to the party, although our conditions arguably have not improved in decades?
Well, you remember what I told you about myself of becoming a conservative. I always heard this is just something we've always done. This
We
is
just
how
have
we
to do it.
got to do it. And so it's like the black community has been so bonded into that there's no other way. There's
Mhm.
no other structure, and there's no other way I can vote. And so they've just done that because that's what they've always done. But like I said, is that we look at your communities, you look at our communities, they are not thriving. You go into the predominantly Caucasian communities, there's changes. There's things, that stop sign will be fixed by the end of the day if it falls down. And the reason of it is it's not, and people make it a racial issue. The reason that is, no, it's because people in predominantly white communities, they hold the elected officials accountable.
Mhm.
They're not going to run over that speed, but they're not going to run over that pothole more than two times before they make a complaint about it. And if they make a complaint about it and it's still like that a month later, you can guarantee you that
You
person
know,
will get reelected.
well, I know you've seen this, and you've been in politics a good while. And I was telling a local podcast host here in Houston, we were having a conversation the other night, and I was talking about what bothers me within the black political circles is the idol worship
Mhm.
that we lay on elected officials. They're human. They put their pants on just like you and I do. They grew up with aspirations to achieve just like you and I. They make mistakes, they have family issues, so forth and so on. But for some reason, we lift them up on this pedestal and idolize them. And in that idolization, there's no accountability. We don't hold them accountable. And when we get that opportunity call them to the carpet, we spend that time adoring them and kissing their butt and things of that nature. And I think that bothers me. Have you noticed things like that?
Well, and I'm not going to limit it to the black movement,
Right. Okay. Okay.
because I've seen it all over. I've seen it in politics in general. Is
Hmm.
that we have politicians are public servants, and for some reason we've dropped that servant. And
Hmm.
for some reason they've dropped that servant. And they forget that your job is to serve the American people, not yourself, not self-interest, not serving. You have Nancy Pelosi with her $25,000 refrigerator eating $13 ice cream, and it
Right.
wasn't Briar. $13 ice cream, and that just shows the disconnect
Hmm. Hmm.
that she is. It always made me feel like she pretty much could have said, "Well, I'm home in my multi-million-dollar home. I got my $25,000 refrigerator. I got my $13 ice cream. People don't even have, even though there's people that live in California, that lives in Chicago, that lives in DC, that don't even have $13 in their pocket. I got multiple different varieties. I have this flavor, I have that flavor, $13 ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm representing you. I am for you,
The everyday person.
the everyday person.
Right.
And that's something that I would say the conservatives does not portray. Okay. We there are millionaire, billionaire conservatives, but they do not make it seem like they are just like the everyday person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one thing I like about President Trump. President Trump is a billionaire.
Is it? Is he?
Well, almost. He's a
Yeah.
millionaire.
Yeah. We
He's,
need to. We need to see
but
some
he's there.
tax returns. Yeah.
But the idea of it is President Trump he's not one of those snooty rich
Yeah. I will agree. I will
individuals.
agree with you there. He does come off to me as a everyday guy.
He is.
Is he?
That's
Uh,
Uncle Trump. That's Uncle Trump.
yeah. Is he arrogant? Yeah. Is he straightforward? Yes. Does he speak the truth as he feels it is the truth, unadulterated? Yeah. You got to respect that. Um,
President Trump reminds me what would happen if my grandfather or my grandmother was president of the United States.
mhm.
Their care is so deep that they want to make sure that whatever is need to be done is done, and that's what President Trump reminds me of. President Trump does not have to be president of the United States, just like former presidents. That was a goal, that was a dream. They career politicians, and they made their money. He's not taking a salary. You
Yeah.
know, and he does, and a lot of presidents come in, or politicians say, "I'm not going to take a salary," and you don't hear anything about it because they
Because they
did
do.
not take that salary when they first came into the job, because they're like, "Oh, you know what? I got to take a salary because
Right. Right.
is not what I expected." This president has been through hell and high water and has not taken a salary.
Yeah.
He's like, let me tell you something. I admire President Trump because there is no way I could have went through and go through what he goes through and not take a dime.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no way.
Let me. I'm going to get the. I got one more question before we're going to get into this Trump conversation. Um, as a black conservative, I know you just talked about President Trump kind of goes through hell, but as a black conservative, I know you go through hell. I know you take your lumps. I know you take hard criticism, especially as a young African American man, and you decided to go against the grain. So I trust me, I know that you take your lumps. How do you deal with it? How do you handle, especially as a president of a national organization that you founded it, and you're going to stand on your beliefs and your truths, but you're human. How do you deal with it? How do you take those lumps?
Can I be honest with you?
Sure.
I don't. Listen, my goal is to create solutions for America.
Mm-hmm.
Like we said, my goal is to make tomorrow better than it was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And those are based upon my policies. So how do I deal with it? How do I deal with the constant, being bashed? Listen, I've been bashed by the mayor of a town that I went to high school in, called me so many disparaging names.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I've been bashed by parents of people I went to school with. I've
Mm-hmm.
been bashed by family members. I've been bashed by everyone who could possibly bash me. And so how do I deal with it? I don't. And the reason I don't is because at the end of the day, it's one of those, I love you and there's nothing you can do about it. And my love for this country goes deeper than someone bashing me. My love for this country goes deeper than what someone feels about me, because I could care less of how people feel about me or what people think about me being a conservative.
Mm-hmm.
What I do care is how the average American is living their life.
Right.
I do care about how our country is going to thrive. I do care about how the next generation will be left. And I do care about what the next generation will have to deal with. And so, yes, I do get bashed. Yes, they do say things, but at the end of the day, I ignore it and I laugh at it and I keep on going, because at the end of the day, I want to make solutions. I'm not going to go back and forth with someone on social media.
Mm-hmm.
People, a part of my team will tell you, I'm not going to go back and forth with you on something. I may make a comment and that's it. I'm not going to go back and forth with you. We're not going to drag each other. And I want to create solutions. And if you're not talking about solutions, to be honest, you're useless to me. If you're not talking about solutions, if you're not wanting to make tomorrow better, if you're not wanting to make make sure that the next generation has a better America,
Yeah,
then I have no time for it. And so, yes, like I said, yes, I get bashed, yes, people, but it goes in one ear and come out the other. I look at it and keep on scrolling.
I respect that. I really admire that because that's a message that can permeate to anybody in any walk
And
of
it
life.
should,
Right,
and I say that to the black Democrats who get bashed by conservatives. I say that to anybody who is different, anyone who believes something different, anyone who has a value of something that is different. Because at the end of the day, our goal is to make America great.
right.
Now, and yes, that's the president's slogan. And not I'm not saying it just because it's the slogan. Our
Mhm.
goal is to make America great.
So you talked about folks who are different being bashed. We have a very different president in the White House,
Hmm.
Donald J. Trump. And I'll tell you, I study presidents. Um, I'm a historian of politics. I love politics. I'm just like you. I've done every role in campaigns except for candidate. I love it. I live and breathe it. I'm the kind of person that watch C-SPAN just to see House debate. I am a big fan of Mike Pence from his days on the House floor, and so I really love it. Um, but Donald Trump, one thing I'll tell you, I'll start out. My question to you is, what do you love about Donald Trump? But I'll tell you what I love about Trump. And I've watched the documentaries and things of that nature. And I know some of my liberal friends won't like that I say this, but I have to be honest. There's a lot that we can learn from Donald Trump's story of becoming president. And if you take his name off of it, take off the name because Donald Trump has become so polarizing. You just look at the story minus the name. A guy who's never been a politician runs for president against all odds. Everybody tells him he can't do it. Folks are laughing at him. He's just this guy who's just a reality show star.
Hmm.
He gains steam. And right as he's gaining a level of steam, the attacks come. And then the audio recordings come out and things of that nature. And the entire party turns their back on him. And everybody jumps ship. We want no parts in this. It pretty much it looks like he's going to lose and lose badly and make the party look bad for the next several years. But he has the bravado to say, hey, I don't, I'm going to keep moving regardless. You can criticize me. I'm going to keep moving because I know what my mission is. And against all odds, I'm going to keep going. And he kept going all by his lonesome, maybe with his close family. And he became president of the United States. And so for me, I think that story, take the name off, can speak to anybody in any walk of life against all odds. When there are haters, when there are difficult circumstances, if you believe in yourself and what it is you set out to do, you can achieve it if you keep moving and stay focused. That's what I love about him. If I'm going to find silver lining, that's what I love about Donald Trump. And so his story is fascinating to me, and he's fascinating to me. What do you love about Donald J. Trump?
Well, I want to say this before you say that
Yeah.
is as the Kojic Church says, let her preach,
Hmm.
because at, because and that's one of the things that I love about him is because regardless, and that should be a message to everyone. This is,
Hmm.
we have a lot of graduates that are graduating from college, from high school, and that should be a message to everyone that yes, you can't walk across the stage. You have these stipulations or whatever life throws your way. You have to be able to overcome it. You can overcome it. A principal once told me, and is that I can't control what life throws at me, but I can control how I respond or how I react.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
that is important, and that is important to this and to everyone in the country. Now, what do I like about president? It's his determination. It's his determination. It is his drive.
Hmm.
At 70 years old, when you find somebody that has a drive like that, you support him.
Hmm.
His drive and his love for America. This president works countless hours around the clock to make sure that this country is in good hands. And that's what I admire about him. I
Yeah.
admire that tops everything.
Now, go ahead, finish your point.
This president has been a champion for historically black colleges. $360 million allocated started by allocating 360 million. Then he proposed another 400 million. Then he said, what the heck, let's just go ahead and make it permanent funding. Mm-hmm. We talk about criminal justice reform. 3,000 people were released under the criminal justice of the First Step Act. We talk about unemployment rate before coronavirus being at an all-time low. More people are back to work. We talk about the 325,000 individuals who have been lifted from poverty. Those are results. And that's why I support the president, because not because of, what people say about him, or people say they don't like what he posts on Twitter or whatever. I support this president because of his results. Right. I support him because the results is what matters.
So from 1 to 10, how would you rate his job performance?
I'll give him a 10.
10?
If I can give him 20 out of 10, if on a 20 out of 1 to 10 rating, if I can give him 20, I would give him 20. I'm not saying that just because he's the Republican president, because there's Republican presidents that I would give a -0. There's Republican governors who I wouldn't even rate at all. Mm-hmm. So it's not right. So it's not because he's conservative. It's not because he's the Republican president. It's because, like I said, it's because of the results.
How would you rate his performance in handling the coronavirus pandemic?
I will give him a 10 on coronavirus pandemic, and I'm gonna tell you why I would give him a 10. Okay. And I want people to know that I'm just not this blind leader of the president. I would give him a 10 on coronavirus because this president has pretty much hit every issue of this. One thing that really knocked me off my feet is immediately once it came out that the Black community was affected at a higher rate with the coronavirus, the task force immediately started to discuss this. The president immediately came up and started to talk about this, and he didn't make excuses for it. He didn't say, he released the facts.
Well, let me ask you this, because there are news reports that say just the opposite of what you're saying. I just read a few articles last few days that say he was more in tune with what was going on and more pressed about it. But once he realized that it was Black and brown folks that are dying at a disproportionate rate, then his focus became kind of more lax, if you will. Are you privy to those conversations, maybe within the White House?
I've heard some bits and pieces of it, but that's something that the Black community tends to do. That's something that we tend to do, and that I've seen us do, not just with President Trump, but with so many other people. I've seen us, we get defensive when it comes to Black issue, when it becomes a Black issue, and we get defensive to the point where we feel it's an insecurity within the Black community.
How so?
Because we always feel sometimes that we are getting the worst end of the deal. Sometimes we are, but not always.
Yeah,
we're getting the worst end of the deal. Because what President Trump could have did is President Trump could have said, "Oh yeah, I heard those statements," and left it at that. That's what it could happen. But the president, what people don't know is the president actually held, the White House held multiple calls with the Black community, conference calls with Black leaders, not just not just Republican, but Democratic as well. The vice president appreciated and acknowledged what Lori Lightfoot in Chicago was doing. He acknowledged what Jesse Jackson was doing. He acknowledged what the NAACP was doing. They acknowledged what a lot of the Black organizations was doing throughout the country. And they talked about it, and they got deeper into it, and we even had the Surgeon General talk about it. And the Surgeon General talked about it, and they said, "Oh, they offended him for saying Pop Pop and Big Mama."
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand why you're upset at a Black man for saying Big Mama and think that you're offended by it, but you wasn't upset and offended by Obama saying Pookie and Ray Ray.
I have my thoughts about that, but okay. So great conversation with Black Conservative Federation President Diante Johnson. I know you're pressed for time here, but I want to ask you, Vernon Jones down in Georgia recently announced a few weeks ago that he's a Democratic state lawmaker in Georgia, and he announced that he is endorsing President Donald Trump for reelection.
Yes.
He took a lot of heat for that. He initially resigned under pressure from the local Democratic Party, which they call him an embarrassment to the party. But then he stood his ground and said that I'm not going to resign. I'm going to stay in this seat. But in his press release, I'm summarizing here, he essentially said, I'm not leaving the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has left Black people, left us on the side of the road, haven't provided resources for us, not speaking loud enough to our issues. And so he felt that he needed to go to a place and go support someone who is speaking on Black issues, as you mentioned. What are your thoughts on Vernon Jones and his decision to come across the aisle against all odds and support President Trump?
So I disagree with Vernon Jones on this, and I've talked to him about this. The Democrat Party didn't leave the Black community. They never showed up.
Okay.
Failed policies and broken promises. They show up in our churches during election time. And if you notice what they say when they show up in the churches, they show up in the churches and they talk about what they're not getting and what's not happening in the community, and then they talk about what the opposite side is doing. And they make failed promises. But what they don't do is, and especially those who are running for re-election, I never hear them. They never hear them telling the Black community on what they've done for them. They never say, "Oh, I did this, I did this, I did that." Maybe in the primary, because primary voters are more. They're looking at those, but they're not. They're not. They haven't showed up. And because if they showed up, they would show up in so many communities to where, such as the Roseland community in Chicago, they would show up to make sure that businesses are constantly flourishing in those communities. I mean, they would show up to make sure that new homes are being built in these communities, that homes are being repaired, that families are being repaired. If you can't fix a street light, if you can't fix a stop sign, then what are you doing? And I talk about stop signs because every time I go to Chicago, I see stop signs flipped off. If it's actually a stop sign there, you just know there's a stop sign there because you just drove through the area before. But if there's a stop sign there, you may just see the signpost. And I say, if an alderman, if a state rep can't get this fixed, if they can't change the small things, then we need to get somebody in there that can do it.
Yeah.
There is no one to blame for the problems that are happening in Chicago. There's no one to blame but the Democrat Party. I asked somebody, when was the last time a Republican was actually the mayor of Chicago?
When was it?
I believe it was in the 50s.
50s, okay.
I asked someone, when was the last time, so when was the last time you had a Republican alderman or, a state rep in the areas? Or, we've had a Republican governor and he made his mistakes and he's no longer there. But there's no one to blame for what's happening in these communities but the Democrat Party. And I'm going to make this last point. Chicago, Detroit, Atlanta, Ferguson, Baltimore, LA, and I can go on. What do those cities have in common?
Lots of persons of color in deep poverty.
And all ran by Democrats.
Yeah. Last thing, and I'll let you go really quickly. Why should Black folks become conservatives? Why is it good for them?
Why is it good for Black folks to become conservative?
Yes.
I tell everyone, think about the teachings of your grandparents. Think about the values that you were raised upon. Think about what you want to see out of life. Think about what you want your children to experience. And most importantly, think about tomorrow.
Yep. Yep. Diante Johnson, president of the Black Conservative Federation. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. Really, really, really appreciate it, the dialogue, and keep up the good work, brother.
Thank you.